The dust from 1,000 hooves choked the air as Violet Lawson clutched her brother's hat tighter to her head, squinting against the setting sun that painted the Montana territory in shades of blood and gold. It was 1876, and the trail ahead promised both salvation and danger, more danger for a woman alone than she cared to contemplate. That's why she wasn't traveling as one. The rough cotton of her brother's shirt scratched against her bound chest, a discomfort she'd gladly endure to reach her destination alive. "Keep up, boy." The wagon master's voice boomed from the front of the caravan. "No stragglers on my watch." Violet nudged her mare forward, keeping her voice deliberately low when she responded, "Yes, sir." 2 weeks into the journey, and no one in the company suspected that Victor Lawson was anything but a slender, soft-spoken young man of 22. Her brother's clothes, his identity, and his dream had become hers the moment consumption had taken him 3 months prior. The trail to Coloma, Montana, wasn't meant for a lone woman. The gold strikes had drawn men from across the country, hard men, desperate men, and the settlements springing up to serve them were even more dangerous. But Victor had purchased the claim before falling ill, and it was all Violet had left. She would honor his memory by making it work, even if it meant living a lie. First time out west. A deep voice startled her from her thoughts. Violet turned to find a tall cowboy riding beside her, his face partially shadowed by the brim of his hat. She'd noticed him before James Porter, the caravan scout. He kept to himself mostly, but there was something in his eyes that unnerved her, like he could see right through her disguise. "Is it that obvious?" She kept her words clipped, the way she'd practiced. He chuckled, a rich sound that seemed out of place in the dusty trail. "You sit a horse well enough, but you've got city written all over you." "Where you from?" "Boston," she answered truthfully. "No harm in that, long way from home." His eyes, blue as a summer sky, studied her face too carefully for comfort. Violet turned away, feigning interest in the terrain ahead. "My brother spoke highly of the opportunities out here." "Brother?" James asked, his tone curious. He passed. The words still hurt to say. "Consumption." James touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Sorry to hear it." They rode in silence for a while, the creak of wagon wheels and the steady rhythm of hooves filling the space between them. "Coloma's rough country," he said finally. "Not many make their fortune there these days." "I'm not looking for a fortune," Violet said. "Just a fresh start." His gaze lingered on her face, then drifted to her hands, too small, too smooth for a man who'd worked a day in his life. "A fresh start," he repeated thoughtfully. "We all want that, I suppose." That night, as the wagon train circled for camp, Violet kept to herself. She'd mastered the art of privacy, waiting until darkness fell to answer nature's call, bathing in streams only when she could be certain no one was nearby. She ate quickly, head down, and retired to her small tent before the men could cajole her into cards or conversation. But as she settled onto her bedroll, a shadow fell across her tent. "Victor," James Porter's voice was soft. "Got a moment?" Violet's heart hammered. She checked that her binding was secure beneath her nightshirt before emerging. "Mr. Porter," he stood in the moonlight, tall and solid as an oak. "Just James, please." "What can I do for you?" She kept her voice steady, though her pulse wasn't. "Thought you might need this." He held out a small revolver, pearl-handled and well-maintained. "Trail gets more dangerous the closer we get to mining country." Violet hesitated. "I couldn't take it," he insisted. "My father gave me two, said a man should always have a backup." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the weapon, and something electric passed between them. She jerked her hand away. "Thank you," she managed. James nodded, then seemed to hesitate. "Victor, there's something—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "Just be careful. Not everyone in this company is trustworthy." Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, melting into the darkness beyond the firelight. The next morning brought storm clouds and tension. Two of the company's horses had gone missing in the night, and accusations flew. Violet kept her head down, checking her mare's tethers and packing her meager belongings. The revolver James had given her was tucked safely in her saddlebag. "Got your back to the world again, Boston." James appeared at her side, his voice pitched low. "Not a good habit out here." "I mind my business," she replied. "Seems safest." "Sometimes," he agreed, "and sometimes it just marks you as prey." He helped her secure a loose strap on her saddle. "Ride near the middle today. Storm's coming and the back of the train will be eating dust and mud." She nodded, surprised by the concern in his voice. "I will, thank you." The storm hit just before noon, turning the trail to slick mud and reducing visibility to mere yards. The wagon train slowed to a crawl. Violet's mare struggled on the slippery ground and twice nearly lost her footing. By the time the wagon master called a halt, they were all drenched and miserable. There would be no tents tonight, no dry wood for fires. The travelers huddled beneath wagons or whatever shelter they could improvise. Violet found herself sharing space under a canvas tarp with James and two other men, both rough-looking miners bound for the same region. "Mighty small fellow," one of them remarked, eyeing Violet with something like suspicion. "How old are you, boy?" "Old enough," she answered shortly. James interjected. "Leave him be, Harrison. Not everyone's built like an ox." Harrison snorted but dropped the subject. The four of them sat in uncomfortable silence as rain pounded the canvas above. When Harrison and his companion eventually dozed off, James shifted closer to Violet. "You should eat something," he said, offering her jerky from his pocket. "Long day tomorrow if this rain lets up, and if it doesn't, then a longer day." His smile flashed white in the dimness. "How'd you come by that limp? Noticed it when you dismounted." Violet stiffened. She hadn't realized her old injury was visible. "Childhood accident, fell from a tree." His eyes, unreadable in the shadows, stayed on her face. "My sister was always climbing things she shouldn't. Broke her arm twice before she turned 12. The mention of a sister surprised her. "You have family," he corrected. "Parents gone 5 years now. Sister married a shopkeeper in St. Louis." There was something wistful in his voice. "Haven't seen her in 3 years. That's the way of it out here, isn't it?" Violet said softly. "Everyone leaving something behind." "Or running from something," he added meaningfully. Before she could respond, Harrison shifted in his sleep, mumbling incoherently, and the moment passed. The next morning dawned clear but cold. The trail had become a quagmire, forcing the wagon train to remain camped while the ground dried. Violet used the opportunity to wash her spare clothes in a nearby stream, carefully timing her visit when most of the company was occupied with repairs or hunting. She had just finished wringing out a shirt when a twig snapped behind her. She whirled, hand reaching for the revolver that wasn't there. James stood at the edge of the trees, his expression unreadable. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to startle you." Violet clutched the wet clothes to her chest. "What are you doing here?" "Hunting." He lifted a brace of rabbits as evidence. "Though game's scarce after the storm." His eyes dropped to her hands, then back to her face. "Need help with those?" "No, thank you." She gathered her things quickly. "I was just finishing." He made no move to leave, blocking her path back to camp. "Victor," he said, and something in his tone made her blood freeze. "I think we need to talk." Violet stepped backward. "About what?" "About why you're binding your chest with strips of cloth." His voice was gentle, but his words hit like physical blows. "About why you flinch whenever someone calls you boy or sir." "I don't know what you're no more Victor Lawson than I am," he interrupted. "I don't know your real name, but I know you're a woman. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "How long have you known?" "Since Sacramento," he admitted. "You carry yourself differently, small things most wouldn't notice." Fear and anger warred within her. "Are you going to tell the others?" James shook his head. "Your secret's safe with me." "Why?" she demanded, suspicious of kindness with no clear motive. "Because I've seen what happens to women alone on this trail," he said simply. "And whatever your reasons, they must be compelling." Violet's shoulders sagged with the sudden weight of truth. "My brother died," she said. "The claim is all I have left." No one would let a woman travel alone to the territories, much less stake a mining claim. James was quiet for a long moment. "What's your real name?" She hesitated, then surrendered this last secret. "Violet Lawson." "Violet," he repeated, as if testing the name. "It suits you better than Victor." A strange feeling fluttered in her chest at the sound of her name on his lips. "You won't tell anyone?" "No," he promised. "But Violet, Coloma isn't kind to any one man or woman. It's a rough place filled with desperate men. What will you do once you get there?" "Work the claim," she said with more conviction than she felt. "I have to try." James ran a hand through his hair, clearly troubled. "At least let me help you. Show you how to handle that revolver properly for starters." She should refuse him trust no one completely, but she was tired of being alone, tired of the constant vigilance. "All right," she agreed, "but I need your word that this stays between us." "You have it," he said solemnly. "Now come on, we should get back before people start wondering where Victor's wandered off to." As they walked back to camp, Violet felt something shift between them, a tension, but also a strange relief. Someone knew her secret, yet she felt lighter rather than exposed. The wagon train resumed its journey the next day. Violet, still victor to the rest of the company, found herself riding beside James more often than not. Under the guise of teaching the young man about survival in the territories, he began showing her skills she would need: how to track game, identify edible plants, read the weather, and shoot straight. "Lower your elbow," he instructed one evening after they'd moved a safe distance from camp for shooting practice. "And don't anticipate the recoil." Violet adjusted her stance, took a breath, and squeezed the trigger. The bottle they'd set up 50 yards away exploded satisfyingly. "Better," James approved. "Two more like that and I might stop worrying about you." "Only two," she teased, surprised by how comfortable she felt in his presence now. He smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Maybe three." As they collected the remaining bottles, their hands brushed. This time, Violet didn't pull away immediately. Something was growing between them, something dangerous and wonderful that she couldn't afford to acknowledge. "James," she began, uncertain what she even wanted to say. "I know," he interrupted softly. "It's impossible." They returned to camp in silence, each lost in thoughts of what could never be. The next day brought new challenges as the trail wound into more rugged country. The wagon master pushed them hard, anxious to reach the next water source before nightfall. By midday, the heat had become oppressive, dust coating every surface, every breath. When they paused briefly to rest the animals, Violet slipped away to refill her canteen at a small spring they'd passed. The cool water was heaven on her parched throat, and she took the risk of removing her hat, splashing water on her face and neck. "Careful," James's voice startled her. "Someone might see you." She spun around, water dripping down her collar. "You shouldn't sneak up on people." "And you shouldn't let your guard down," he countered, but his eyes were kind. "Here." He offered a clean handkerchief. "You've mud on your cheek." Their fingers touched as she took it, and neither pulled away immediately. Something electric passed between them, a current of unspoken possibility. "Violet," he said softly, her true name like a caress. "Don't," she whispered. "Please." He stepped back, respectful of her boundaries even as his eyes conveyed deeper feelings. "We should get back." As they returned to the waiting caravan, a commotion near the lead wagon drew their attention. The wagon master was arguing with a man on horseback, a stranger with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. "What's happening?" Violet asked one of the other travelers. "Sheriff from the next settlement," the man explained. "Says there's been trouble ahead, some kind of standoff with local Indians." "Trail might be blocked." James's expression darkened. "Stay close to me," he murmured. "If there's trouble, we may need to make decisions quickly." The wagon master called the company together, his face grave. "Sheriff Daniels brings word that a band of Blackfoot warriors has blocked the trail 10 miles ahead. They claim travelers have been hunting on their traditional grounds." Murmurs rippled through the group. "Is there another route?" someone called. "A detour would add 4 days," the wagon master replied, "and take us through rougher country." "So we fight our way through," Harrison shouted, and several men voiced agreement. The sheriff raised his hands for quiet. "That would be unwise. These aren't hostile actions, they're asking for respectful negotiation. Their chief is willing to meet with representatives from your company." "And if we refuse?" another voice challenged. "Then you'll likely find 50 warriors blocking your path," the sheriff said bluntly. "I've seen their numbers myself." After heated debate, it was decided that the wagon master, the sheriff, and 2 others would meet with the Blackfoot leaders. James volunteered immediately. "I've dealt with the Blackfoot before," he explained. "They're reasonable if approached with respect." To Violet's surprise, he then suggested Victor Lawson as the 4th representative. "The boy's quiet and observant," he told the wagon master. "Won't cause trouble with hasty words." Despite objections that she was too young and inexperienced, the wagon master eventually agreed, largely due to James's insistence. When they had a moment alone, Violet confronted him. "Why would you volunteer me for this? It's dangerous, and what if they realize I'm a woman?" "They won't," he assured her. "Blackfoot warriors respect individuals based on conduct, not size or strength. Just follow my lead and stay calm. And if there's trouble," his eyes met hers steadily, "then we face it together." The meeting was arranged for the following morning. As Violet prepared, checking her revolver and straightening her clothes with trembling hands, James appeared at her tent. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though her stomach churned with anxiety. "As I'll ever be." The 4 representatives rode out at dawn, following the sheriff's lead. After an hour's ride, they crested a hill to find a group of mounted warriors waiting in the valley below. Their faces were solemn, their postures proud. The sheriff spoke first, greeting the Blackfoot leader, a man called many horses in halting phrases of their language. Then negotiations began through a translator. The chief's complaints were legitimate. Travelers had been hunting elk and buffalo that the tribe depended upon, showing no respect for either the land or its original inhabitants. Some had even fired upon tribal hunters who approached them. As the wagon master offered compromises, Violet observed the warriors. Their dignity impressed her, as did their reasonable requests. Passage through their hunting grounds would be granted if the travelers agreed to hunt only what they needed for immediate food, and to avoid certain sacred areas that the translator described. When it seemed the negotiations had reached a successful conclusion, a commotion arose from behind them. Turning in her saddle, Violet saw Harrison and 3 other men from their company approaching on horseback, rifles visible. "What are those fools doing?" the wagon master hissed. James immediately rode toward them, hands raised to show he meant no threat. "Harrison, this is a peaceful meeting. Your presence here violates our agreement." "Ain't having no savages dictate where white men can travel," Harrison spat, raising his rifle. Everything happened at once. James lunged for Harrison's weapon. The chief's warriors reached for their bows. Violet, acting on instinct, positioned her horse between the two groups, raising her voice to be heard above the chaos. "Stop," she shouted, momentarily forgetting to lower her pitch. "We have an agreement." "There's no need for bloodshed." Harrison's eyes narrowed at her. "Move aside, boy, or are you a redskin lover?" "I'm someone who doesn't want to die needlessly," she retorted, keeping her horse steady as she faced him down. "The chief's terms are fair." The sheriff added his authority, threatening to arrest Harrison for interfering in official negotiations. After tense moments that felt like hours, Harrison and his companions reluctantly withdrew. When Violet turned back to the chief, she found him studying her with keen interest. He said something to the translator, who looked surprised. "What did he say?" Violet asked nervously. "He says you have the heart of a warrior but the eyes of a woman who has seen sorrow," the translator replied. "He respects your courage." James moved his horse beside hers, a silent show of support. The wagon master quickly reaffirmed their agreement with the Blackfoot, and the meeting concluded peacefully. As they prepared to return to their company, the chief approached Violet directly, offering a small leather pouch. "A protection charm," the translator explained, "for your journey ahead." Violet accepted it with proper reverence, thanking him in the few Blackfoot words James had taught her the night before. The chief nodded approvingly before rejoining his warriors. On the ride back, the wagon master expressed his gratitude. "Quick thinking, Victor. You've got nerve for someone so young." James caught her eye, his expression a mixture of pride and something deeper. "He certainly does," he agreed. That evening, after reporting their successful negotiation to the company, Violet retreated to her tent, emotionally exhausted. She examined the chief's gift, a small leather pouch containing what appeared to be herbs and tiny carved stones. The gesture touched her deeply. A soft voice called from outside. "Victor, may I speak with you, James?" Her heart quickened as she tucked the pouch away and invited him in. He ducked beneath the canvas, sitting cross-legged on the ground. For a moment he simply looked at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "You were extraordinary today." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Harrison could have started a massacre, but he didn't because of you." James reached for her hand, then seemed to think better of it. "Violet, he stopped, struggling for words. "I find myself thinking of you in ways I shouldn't," her breath caught. "James, I know," he interrupted. "It's impossible. You're posing as a man. We're surrounded by people who would condemn us both if they knew the truth. And once we reach Coloma, you'll have your claim and I'll move on with the caravan." "Yes," she agreed, though the thought brought unexpected pain. "That's how it must be." He nodded, his expression resigned. "I just wanted you to know that you've earned my respect. And that if circumstances were different." He trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. After he left, Violet lay awake for hours, her mind racing with possibilities she couldn't afford to consider. The next morning they broke camp early, eager to clear Blackfoot territory quickly. The trail grew more challenging as they entered the mountains, narrow passes forcing them to proceed in single file. Violet found herself near the back of the column, with James riding sweep behind her. Around midday, as they navigated a particularly treacherous section of trail with a steep drop-off to their right, Harrison sidled his horse alongside Violet's. Something in his expression sent warning signals through her body. "Funny thing happened yesterday," he said conversationally. "When you were shouting at me, your voice went up, like a woman's." Violet kept her eyes on the trail ahead. "The heat and excitement," she said evenly, "happens to many men." "Does it?" Harrison moved his horse closer, crowding hers dangerously near the edge. "Been watching you, Victor." You don't piss with the rest of us men. You're too dainty with your movements. And you and Porter have awful lot of private conversations." "Mr. Porter has been kind enough to teach me survival skills," she replied, keeping her voice deliberately low. "As for my personal habits, I was raised to value privacy." Harrison snorted. "I think you're a woman, and I think Porter knows it." His hand shot out, grabbing for her hat. Violet jerked away, but the sudden movement startled her mare. The horse sidestepped toward the drop-off, loose stones crumbling beneath its hooves. For one terrifying moment, Violet felt the animal losing its footing. Then James was there, his horse shouldering Harrison's aside while his hand steadied Violet's mare. "Back off, Harrison," he growled. "Now." Harrison's eyes darted between them, calculation evident in his expression. "Just having a friendly chat with the boy," he said, emphasizing the last word. "No harm meant." "Move ahead," James ordered, "or explain to the wagon master why you're endangering others on a dangerous pass." With a final suspicious glance at Violet, Harrison nudged his horse forward, leaving them behind. "He knows," Violet whispered once he was out of earshot. "He suspects," James corrected, "but he has no proof." "What if he tells the others, without evidence? They'll think he's causing trouble." James's expression was grim. "But we need to be more careful. Harrison's not the type to let something go." That night, as they made camp in a sheltered valley, tension hung in the air. Harrison and his friends kept watching Violet, whispering among themselves. She stayed close to the fire, aware that isolation would only feed their suspicions. When she finally retired to her tent, she placed the revolver within easy reach. Sleep came fitfully, broken by every small sound from the camp around her. Near midnight, she awoke to the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching her tent. Her hand closed around the revolver as the canvas rustled. "Victor," James's voice came in an urgent whisper. "Are you awake?" She released the gun with shaking fingers. "Yes, what is it?" "Harrison and his friends are planning something. I overheard them talking about teaching you a lesson, proving you're a woman to the whole company." Cold fear gripped her. "When?" "Before dawn, I think. We need to leave now." Violet didn't hesitate. "Give me 2 minutes." She packed quickly, essential items only. When she emerged, James was waiting with both their horses saddled. He handed her a bundle. "Food and extra ammunition," he explained quietly. "I've told the wagon master I'm scouting ahead with you to check the trail. It should buy us a day before anyone realizes we're not coming back." "Where will we go?" "There's another route to Coloma, longer but less traveled. I know the way." They led their horses quietly past the sleeping forms of their fellow travelers, only mounting once they were well beyond the camp. As they rode into the moonlit night, Violet felt equal measures of fear and exhilaration. "We're deserting the caravan," she said, the reality of their situation sinking in. "We are," James agreed, "but staying would have been more dangerous for you." "For us," she corrected. "They would have branded you a conspirator." He nodded grimly. "Let's put some miles behind us before dawn." They rode through the night, following game trails and streams that wouldn't appear on any map. As the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky, they paused in a sheltered grove to rest the horses. "We should be safe here for a few hours," James said, helping Violet dismount. The casual touch of his hands at her waist lingered slightly longer than necessary, and when she met his eyes, the pretense between them seemed suddenly paper-thin. "James," she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. He stepped back, maintaining the propriety they both clung to. "You should rest." "I'll keep watch." Violet nodded, settling against a tree trunk. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. James sat nearby, alert and watchful, his profile strong against the brightening sky. In the quiet intimacy of their isolation, the feelings she'd been suppressing grew impossible to ignore. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. "You're risking everything." He considered the question seriously before answering. At first it was simple decency, a woman alone on this trail. He shook his head, but now, his eyes met hers. "Now it's because I can't imagine continuing without you." The admission hung between them, changing everything and nothing. They were still in danger. She was still disguised as a man. Their future remained uncertain. "We should keep moving," she said, though what she wanted was to cross the distance between them. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We'll reach Coloma in about 5 days if we make good time. 5 more days of pretending. 5 more days of this careful distance. Then what?" They traveled through increasingly rugged country, avoiding the main trails where they might encounter other travelers. James proved to be an expert guide, finding water and game where Violet saw nothing but wilderness. Each night, they camped far from established routes, sharing simple meals and conversation that grew more personal with each passing day. On their 3rd evening alone, as they sat beside a small fire, James began telling her about his past. "I wasn't always a scout," he revealed. "Had a small ranch in Colorado once. Wife, too." The mention of a wife startled Violet. "You were married," he nodded, his eyes on the flames. "Emily, we were young, barely 20, had big dreams of building something lasting." His voice grew softer. "Fever took her our 2nd winter, the baby too." "I'm so sorry," Violet whispered, aching for his loss. After that, couldn't stand the quiet, sold everything and started moving. Never stayed anywhere more than a season. He looked up, meeting her eyes across the fire. "Until now, I never wanted to." The implication was clear and Violet's heart raced. "James, we can't." "I know," he interrupted. "Your claim, your brother's dream, I understand." But his eyes said he hoped for more, and Violet couldn't deny the same hope lived within her. On the 4th day, disaster struck. As they forded a swollen creek, Violet's mare lost its footing on the slippery rocks. The animal panicked, rearing in the rushing water. Violet was thrown, her head striking a boulder as she fell. James reached her in seconds, dragging her unconscious form to the shore while the terrified horse scrambled up the bank. Blood streamed from a gash on Violet's temple, staining her collar crimson. With gentle urgency, James stripped away her sodden jacket and shirt to check for other injuries, exposing the bindings around her chest. As his fingers worked to loosen the constricting cloth, her eyes fluttered open. "James," she murmured, disoriented. "I'm here," he assured her, covering her with his own dry coat. "You hit your head. Try not to move." She reached up, touching the wound with trembling fingers. "The horses." "Both safe," he said. "Though your saddlebags went downstream, we lost some supplies." James built a shelter of pine boughs, then carefully cleaned and bandaged her head wound. The injury wasn't life-threatening, but Violet was dizzy and nauseated, signs of concussion that concerned him deeply. "We'll rest here tonight," he decided. "You're in no condition to travel." Violet didn't argue, which told him more about her condition than any complaint would have. As darkness fell, her shivering increased despite the fire and blankets. "Fever," James murmured worriedly, feeling her forehead. "Your clothes are still damp." In the firelight, her face was pale except for 2 bright spots of color high on her cheekbones. Her eyes, when they opened, were glassy with fever. "Cold," she whispered. "So cold." Making a decision, James shed his outer clothes and slipped under the blankets beside her, pulling her against his chest. "Body heat," he explained, though she was probably too feverish to question his actions. "It's the fastest way to warm you." Through the night, he held her, replacing wet cloths on her forehead and murmuring reassurances when fever dreams made her restless. By dawn, her temperature had dropped, and she slept more peacefully in his arms. James watched her face in the early light, memorizing each feature. Sometime during their journey, his protective instincts had transformed into something deeper, something he hadn't felt since Emily died. It terrified and elated him in equal measure. Violet woke to find herself held securely against James's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, absorbing the intimacy of their position. His arm curved protectively around her waist, his breath warm against her hair. She should move away, maintain the boundaries that kept them both safe. Instead, she tilted her face up to study him in sleep. His features, usually vigilant, were relaxed now, making him appear younger. Dark lashes rested against weathered cheeks and stubble shadowed his strong jaw. Without thinking, she reached up to touch his face. James's eyes opened at her touch, instantly alert. When he found her watching him, something vulnerable passed across his expression. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "Better," she answered truthfully. "Thank you for taking care of me." Neither made any move to separate. In the soft morning light, the pretenses between them seemed absurd. "Violet," he began, her name a caress. She silenced him with a finger to his lips. "Don't say it can't work," she whispered. "Not yet." Slowly, giving him every chance to pull away, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative with newness. Then James's hand came up to cradle her face, and the tenderness in his touch broke something open inside her. When they finally parted, his eyes held questions she couldn't answer. Instead, she laid her head against his chest, listening to the accelerated rhythm of his heart. "We should reach Coloma tomorrow," he said after a while. "What then?" It was the question that had haunted them both. "I don't know," she admitted. "The claim was Victor's dream, not mine. I just couldn't bear to let it go. It was all I had left of him." James stroked her hair gently. "And now I have something else to consider." She looked up at him. "But James, how could it possibly work? Even if I abandoned the disguise once we reached Coloma, people would discover the deception eventually." "We could go elsewhere," he suggested. "Start fresh where no one knows either of us." The possibility was tempting, so tempting that Violet forced herself to remember her brother's face, his excitement when he'd purchased the claim. "I have to at least see the land," she decided. "I owe Victor that much." James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then that's what we'll do." They reached the outskirts of Coloma the following evening. The town was smaller than Violet had imagined, a single dusty street lined with false-fronted buildings, most of them saloons or supply stores serving the surrounding mining operations. Men outnumbered women at least 20-1, their faces weathered and hard beneath battered hats. James led them to a small hotel at the quieter end of town. "Wait here," he instructed, leaving Violet with the horses while he secured accommodations. She observed the town warily, noting the curious glances directed her way. Even in men's clothing, she felt exposed now, as though her true identity was obvious to anyone who looked closely. James returned quickly. "I've taken 2 rooms side by side," he explained, keeping up appearances. The hotel was basic but clean. Once behind the closed door of her room, Violet sank onto the narrow bed, overwhelmed by the journey's end. Tomorrow she would need to locate the mining recorder's office and present Victor's deed. What came after that remained uncertain. A soft knock at the connecting door roused her from her thoughts. "Violet," James's voice was low. "May I come in?" She opened the door to find him freshly shaven, his hair damp from washing. The transformation was striking beneath the trail dust. He was a remarkably handsome man. "I thought we might go to dinner," he suggested. "There's a decent-looking place down the street." Violet gestured ruefully at her travel-worn appearance. "Like this. There's a bathhouse behind the hotel," he told her, "and I took the liberty of purchasing these." From behind his back he produced a bundle wrapped in brown paper. It seemed time. Inside the package, Violet found a simple blue dress, modestly cut but unmistakably feminine. Her fingers trembled as she touched the fabric. "James," she breathed. "I can't just—" "You can," he said gently. "Violet Lawson can arrive in Coloma tonight, looking for her late brother's claim. No one here knows Victor was expected." The plan was audacious yet simple. After months of hiding, the thought of stepping into the world as herself was both terrifying and liberating. "Will you wait?" she asked. "While I bathe and change." His smile was answer enough. An hour later, Violet stood before the small mirror in her room, hardly recognizing herself. The dress fit well enough, and she'd arranged her hair grown shaggy during her disguise into a simple feminine style. Without bindings and oversized clothes, her figure was clearly that of a young woman. When she opened the connecting door, James stared at her in open admiration. "You're beautiful," he said simply. She blushed, unused to such direct compliments. "It feels strange, like I'm disguised as myself." He offered his arm. "Shall we introduce Miss Violet Lawson to Coloma?" As they walked down the hotel stairs, Violet was acutely aware of the changed perceptions around her. The clerk, who had barely glanced at Victor, now stared appreciatively at Violet. The men lounging on the porch straightened when she appeared. James's hand at the small of her back was both protective and possessive as he guided her toward the restaurant. Inside, heads turned as they were seated, whispers following in their wake. "Everyone's staring," Violet murmured uncomfortably. "A beautiful woman is a rarity here," James replied. "But it's more than that. You carry yourself with dignity. It commands respect." Over a simple but well-prepared meal, they discussed their plan for the following day. James would accompany Violet to the recorder's office, where she would explain that she had come to claim her late brother's property. "What if they refuse to recognize my claim?" she worried. "The deed is legitimate," James assured her. "And I've heard the recorder here is an honest man. If there's trouble, we'll find another solution." His confidence calmed her fears. As they finished their meal, Violet realized with surprise how natural it felt to be with him like this, no pretenses between them. Simply a man and woman enjoying each other's company. Walking back to the hotel beneath a canopy of stars, James took her hand. The simple contact sent warmth spreading through her body. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "know that he stopped, seeming to search for the right words. "I care for you, Violet. More than I thought possible after Emily." She squeezed his hand in response. "And you." At her door, he kissed her, a proper goodnight kiss that promised more. "Sleep well," he murmured against her lips. "Tomorrow begins your new life." Alone in her room, Violet touched her lips where his had been, wondering at the strange path that had brought her here. She had set out to honor her brother's dream and found something unexpected along the way, not just love, but a stronger sense of who she truly was. The mining recorder's office occupied a small building near the center of town. As Violet and James approached the next morning, she fought to control her nervousness. She wore the blue dress again, with a shawl James had purchased that morning to make her appearance more respectable. The recorder, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up with surprise when they entered. "Good morning, folks. What can I do for you?" Violet stepped forward. "My name is Violet Lawson. My brother Victor purchased a claim here before his death. I've come to take possession of it." The man's eyebrows rose. "A mining claim? For a lady?" "The deed is in my brother's name," she explained, producing the document from her reticule. "But as his only living relative, the property passes to me." The recorder examined the deed carefully, consulting a large ledger book. "Everything appears in order," he admitted reluctantly. "But Miss Lawson, mining is no occupation for a woman. Perhaps you should consider selling the claim." "I intend to work it," Violet stated firmly. "Alone." The recorder's tone made his opinion of this plan clear. James stepped forward. "Not alone. I'll be assisting Miss Lawson." The recorder looked between them, speculation in his eyes. "I see. Well, the deed is valid. The claim is yours, Miss Lawson." He made a notation in his ledger. "It's about 5 miles northwest of town, along Painter Creek. Not one of the richer strikes, I should warn you." "Thank you," Violet said, reclaiming the deed. "We'll find it." Outside, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "It worked." James smiled at her excitement. "Did you doubt it would? The claim is rightfully yours." "Our next challenge will be finding it," she said, "and seeing if it's worth anything." They purchased supplies and hired a wagon, setting out that afternoon for the claim. The trail followed Painter Creek upstream, past several working mines where men paused in their labor to watch them pass. Violet noted their curious gazes but held her head high. 5 miles from town, they found the boundaries marked with stakes bearing Victor's name. The claim encompassed a stretch of creek and the hillside above it, where a small cabin stood in a grove of pines. "Victor built that?" Violet asked in wonder as they approached the structure. James examined the cabin with a practiced eye. "Looks about a year old. Solid construction." He pushed open the door, revealing a simple interior one-room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table and chairs, and a narrow bed. "It's perfect," Violet breathed, running her hand along the table's edge. Here was tangible evidence of her brother's dreams, his handiwork, his vision for a future he never got to enjoy. They unloaded their supplies, making the cabin habitable again after months of abandonment. As the sun began to set, James built a fire in the fireplace while Violet arranged their few belongings. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on either of them. When their eyes met across the small space, the question of sleeping arrangements hung unspoken between them. "I'll make a pallet outside," James offered, ever the gentleman. "Don't be ridiculous," Violet replied. "It's too cold at night. We'll share the cabin." After a moment's hesitation, she added, "But perhaps not yet the bed." He nodded, respecting her boundaries. "I'll be perfectly comfortable on the floor." That night, lying in Victor's bed while James slept near the fire, Violet contemplated the strange turns her journey had taken. She had come west disguised as a man, seeking only to honor her brother's memory. Now she found herself contemplating a future with a man who had seen through her disguise and valued the woman beneath. The next day, they began exploring the claim. James, who had experience in several mining operations, showed Violet how to pan for gold in the creek. Their first attempts yielded only a few tiny flakes, enough to confirm the presence of gold, but not in quantities that would make them rich. "The real deposit might be upstream or in the hillside," James explained. "It will take time and work to find it." Over the following days, they fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were spent working the claim, afternoons hunting or improving the cabin, evenings planning their next steps. Slowly, the boundaries between them dissolved. James moved from the floor to the bed, and Violet discovered the joy of falling asleep and waking in his arms. They made weekly trips into Coloma for supplies, and with each visit, Violet grew more comfortable in her role as a female claim owner. Though some still viewed her with suspicion or disapproval, others, particularly the few women in town, admired her independence. A month after their arrival, As they lay together watching firelight dance across the cabin ceiling, James propped himself on one elbow to look down at her. "Marry me," he said simply. Violet's breath caught. "James, I love you," he continued. "I think I have since Sacramento when I first saw through your disguise and admired the courage beneath it. I want to build a life with you, whether it's here or somewhere else." She reached up to touch his face, memorizing its contours. "I love you too," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The next day they rode into Coloma and found the preacher, a kind-faced man who agreed to perform the ceremony immediately. With the hotel proprietor and his wife as witnesses, Violet Lawson became Violet Porter in a simple service that meant more to her than any elaborate Eastern wedding could have. That night, as husband and wife, they returned to their cabin. James carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture in their untraditional circumstances. "Mrs. Porter," he murmured, setting her gently on her feet. "I like the sound of that." "As do I, Mr. Porter." She twined her arms around his neck, marveling at how right it felt to belong to him and he to her. Later, as they lay entwined in the darkness, James whispered, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving Boston? Taking your brother's place?" Violet considered the question seriously. "I regret that Victor died," she said finally. "I regret that he never saw this place, never worked his claim, but I can't regret the path that led me to you. Even the danger, the deception, especially those," she said, smiling in the darkness. "Without them, we might never have met. Or if we had, you might have seen only a proper Boston lady, not the woman I truly am." He pulled her closer. "I would have seen you," he promised. "Some things are meant to be." As summer turned to autumn, their work on the claim began showing more promise. They discovered a small but rich vein in the hillside that yielded enough gold to secure their immediate future. James proved to be an excellent miner, and Violet an astute manager of their resources. They invested in proper equipment and hired 2 local men to help with the heavier work. Violet insisted on fair wages and safe practices, earning respect even from those who had initially doubted a woman's ability to run a mining operation. When winter came, bringing deep snow and bitter cold, they were well prepared. The cabin, insulated and expanded with James's carpentry skills, remained warm and comfortable. On the longest nights they sat before the fire making plans for spring, perhaps a larger house, maybe even children someday. One snowy evening, as they enjoyed a simple dinner, a pounding at their door startled them both. James reached for his revolver before answering. On their doorstep stood Harrison, almost unrecognizable beneath a snow-crusted beard and ragged clothes. His eyes widened at the sight of Violet in her dress. "I knew it," he said hoarsely. "I knew you were a woman." James kept the gun visible. "What do you want, Harrison?" The man swayed on his feet. "Don't mean trouble," he mumbled. "Just need shelter. Storm caught me prospecting up the creek." Despite their history, they couldn't turn him away to freeze. James helped him inside while Violet prepared hot coffee and food. Harrison watched her movements with a mixture of triumph and confusion. "You were Victor Lawson," he said, "on the wagon train." "I was," Violet acknowledged, setting a plate before him. "My name is Violet Porter now." Harrison looked between them. "You two are married," James confirmed, his tone warning against further questions. As Harrison wolfed down the food, Violet and James exchanged glances, silently debating what to do. When the storm passed, Harrison would return to Coloma. Would he spread the story of Violet's deception? To their surprise, Harrison addressed the unspoken concern himself. "Your secret's safe with me," he said, wiping his mouth. "Figure you had your reasons, and seems to have worked out well enough." He gestured at the comfortable cabin. "You've done all right here." "We have," James agreed cautiously. Harrison shrugged. Besides, who'd believe me anyway? Just a broke prospector with too many tall tales already. They allowed him to sleep by the fire that night. In the morning, when the storm had passed, James provided him with supplies for his journey back to town. At the door, Harrison paused. No hard feelings, he asked, extending his hand to James. After a moment's hesitation, James shook it. No hard feelings. As they watched him trudge away through the snow, Violet leaned against James's side. "Do you think he'll keep his word?" "Strangely, I do," James replied. "But even if he doesn't, it doesn't matter anymore. We've built something here that can withstand a little gossip." He was right. Over the following months, no rumors surfaced in Coloma. Harrison, it seemed, had kept their secret. Perhaps in his own rough way, he respected what they had accomplished. Spring brought new life to their mountainside. Wildflowers carpeted the slopes, and the creek ran full with melting snow. Their mining operation prospered, yielding enough gold to ensure comfort without excessive wealth. On a warm May evening, as they sat on the porch of their expanded cabin watching sunset paint the distant peaks, Violet took James's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "We'll need to prepare a cradle," she said softly. "For autumn." His eyes widened, joy spreading across his features. "A baby." "You're certain?" she nodded, laughing as he gathered her into a careful embrace. His hand remained protectively over the slight curve of her belly, as if already shielding their child from the world. "Boy or girl," he murmured. "They'll grow up knowing their mother's courage." "And their father's kindness," Violet added. "The kindness that saved me on the trail." James kissed her tenderly. "You saved yourself, Violet. I just kept your secret." On a crisp October day, their son was born, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. They named him Victor James Porter, honoring the brother whose dream had brought them together. As Violet nursed her son before the fireplace, watching James put the finishing touches on a rocking cradle he'd crafted himself, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. She had set out disguised as a man, seeking only to claim a piece of land. Instead, she had discovered her own strength, found love in unexpected places, and created a family that transcended convention. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About disguises," she replied, "and how sometimes we hide ourselves so completely that we forget who we truly are." He came to sit beside her, one arm around her shoulders, the other gently touching his son's downy head. "And sometimes," he said, "it takes someone who sees through the disguise to remind us." In the years that followed, their family grew. A daughter joined them 2 years later, a spirited girl they named Emily Rose. The mining claim continued to provide well, though never extravagantly. Eventually, James diversified their interests, purchasing grazing land for cattle and establishing a small but successful freight business serving the surrounding communities. Violet became a respected figure in Coloma, known for her fair business practices and her advocacy for the town's growing number of women. Few ever suspected that she had once traveled the dangerous trails disguised as a man, though occasionally she caught James watching her with that special knowing smile that said he remembered and admired her courage still. Their children grew strong in the mountain air, learning both the practical skills of frontier life and the values their parents held dear: honesty, resilience, and the courage to forge one's own path. On their 20th wedding anniversary, James surprised Violet with a journey not east to Boston, but west to the Pacific coast, a place neither had seen. Standing on the shore watching the endless waves, Violet felt the same sense of possibility that had driven her brother westward all those years ago. "Any regrets?" James asked, his arm around her waist. silver now threading his dark hair. Violet leaned against the solid strength that had been her constant through 2 decades of joy and hardship. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Every step of the journey brought me here." As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in colors no artist could capture, she thought of the frightened young woman who had bound her chest and donned her brother's clothes, setting out on a trail that promised only danger. How little that woman had known about the strength within her, or the love that waited at the journey's end. "Your secret's safe with me," James had promised all those years ago. He had kept that promise, but had given her something far more precious: the freedom to eventually live without secrets, to be fully herself in a world that might not have accepted her journey but celebrated its destination. In the soft twilight, James took her hand, and together they walked back to where their children waited. The path behind them had been unconventional, the trail ahead still uncharted, but they would face it as they had everything else side by side, their love a compass more reliable than any map.